Good morning, it's Tuesday morning and we are starting a new chapter in Mark today. Jess finished off chapter 1 for us yesterday, so I'm going to be kicking us off in chapter 2 and I'm going to be reading, it's quite a large chunk but it's a good story, so bear with me, verses 1 to 12. A few days later, when Jesus again entered Capernaum, the people heard that he had come home. They gathered in such large numbers that there was no room left, not even outside the door, and he preached the word to them. Some men came, bringing to him a paralysed man carried by 4 of them. Since they could not get him to Jesus because of the crowd, they made an opening in the roof above Jesus by digging through it, and then lowered the mat the man was lying on. When Jesus saw their faith, he said to the paralysed man, "Son, your sins are forgiven." Now some teachers of the law were sitting there thinking to themselves, "Why does this fellow talk like this? He's blaspheming. Who can forgive sins but God alone?" Immediately Jesus knew in his spirit that this was what they were thinking in their hearts, and he said to them, "Why are you thinking these things? Which is easier, to say to this paralysed man, 'Your sins are forgiven,' or to say, 'Get up, take your mat and walk'? But I want you to know that the Son of Man has authority on earth to forgive sins." So he said to the man, "I tell you, get up, take your mat and go home." He got up, took his mat and walked out in full view of them all. This amazed everyone, and they praised God, saying, "We have never seen anything like this." So it's a good story, and there's a couple of different characters in that story. I guess first I want to look at the friends who carried the paralysed man. You know, they believed that Jesus could heal him, and they believed it so much that they carried a sick man. And I think Jess touched on it a couple of days ago about how touching sick people was considered really unclean, and it would have lowered kind of your social ranking within their society. But these friends carried their sick friend because they so fervently believed that Jesus could heal him. Like, they are really good friends. I hope that I'm that kind of friend. I hope you want to be that kind of friend too. And in fact, Jesus rewards them for their friendship, for their faith, for their belief that Jesus could heal them. It says in verse 5, when Jesus saw their faith, he said to the paralysed man, "Son, your sins are forgiven." It was when Jesus saw the faith of those friends, that's what kind of caught Jesus' attention, their commitment to their friend, to getting him to Jesus. But there are other people in the story, and they maybe aren't quite so helpful. There's that crowd, aren't there? There's a crowd that was so full that these friends couldn't get their disabled friend, their paralysed friend, to Jesus. And it makes me think, when you're on like a motorway, you know, when you're on a motorway and all the traffic stops and the cars are like buffer to buffer and it's all, you know what I'm on about, a traffic jam. It's too early in the morning for words. But when the ambulance sounds and the blue lights flash, we can all make a path, can't we? It doesn't matter that there was nowhere to go a minute ago. When the ambulance is there, we can make a path. So why couldn't these friends, or not friends, these crowds, make a pathway for the friends? And I think we need to be careful. I know some of you watching are Christians. We need to be careful that we aren't that crowd, that we aren't creating a barrier for other people to reach Jesus. And it might not be a physical barrier, but it might be. It might be that we're just forming little groups with our backs turned to society so that we can't see when someone is trying to bring someone in need to Jesus. So we need to make sure we're not that. And finally, I want to look at Jesus. He's the main man. And yeah, he forgives the guy his sins. He doesn't heal him straight away. And he can do both, can't he? Because he's God, he does do both by the end of the story. And kind of what he's saying to the religious leaders is, look, you know, only God has the authority to heal, and only God has the authority to forgive sins. Like, he couldn't do either of those if he wasn't God. But he does the sin thing first, because you can't see that. You have to believe that your sins are forgiven. You can't, there's no outward sign of that. You have to believe it. And when you believe it, when that man believes it, it brings great joy. But then Jesus goes on to create a sign so that the Pharisees, who are the teachers of the law, can see that he has the power of God. He goes on then to heal the man as well as forgive his sins so that the Pharisees can see. But in other verses in the Bible, it talks about how faith, how belief should be without sight. And for those who have the belief without the sight, it brings them great joy. And like that man and his forgiveness, our freedom, the Christian word we would use is salvation, which is just about our lives being transformed, being renewed, being saved by Jesus. That is something that is offered freely with no kind of outward sign, you know. I would believe that I have received salvation, but I can't show you it. It's not something that I can say, hey, look, here's my salvation. Not yet, anyway. And it's something you have to believe in. And if we don't believe in Jesus, in the cross, in what he's done for us, then we don't get that joy of a new life with Jesus, a new life with Christ. It's not something like being healed. It's something different. I don't feel like I'm explaining myself all that well this early in the morning, but hopefully you get what I'm on about. So yeah, nowadays, of course, healing does still happen, but a lot of the time it happens through doctors and through medical professionals and in a hospital. It doesn't mean it's any more or any less amazing that, you know, the doctors can help people walk, but also sins are forgiven still today, and sometimes that might be us forgiving our friends, but definitely it's God forgiving us for all the stuff that we've messed up. And the great thing is that he just offers it to us for free, just like he did to that man. The man who was lowered down didn't say, hey, I've messed up, can you forgive me? What do I need to do? Jesus just said, you're forgiven. And that's what he says to us as well. We don't have to do anything. We don't have to be anything special. God's forgiveness is just offered to us freely. We just have to grab hold of it and believe in it, which is great news, isn't it?